Alex, it appears you have joined us this morning, this reunion of Bombin the AM with Scoops and the Wolf, doing your best Gollum impression.
I feel like Gollum's voice comes with a little bit of like a higher gait to it than perhaps what I'm doing. I was thinking more of a many years removed from rehab Mickey Rourke, perhaps.
Yeah, sure, we go a little bit darker.
A little bit more like gargling broken glass kind of tenor to the whole thing.
Yeah, you sound bad. You're sick.
I'm getting sick.
Oh, so you,
So
you don't think you don't think you even hit the apex yet?
no, no. So I got off the plane on Wednesday night, came in, felt tired but fine. Woke up yesterday. My throat was on fire. I sounded like this. And other than like a couple of sniffles here and there, otherwise I'm fine. Like I feel fine. It's just that my voice sounds like hell is trying to escape from my vocal cords.
If you wanted to get
Like
into voice
like
acting right now
the
would be a
Dark
good
Lord
time.
has started using my trachea as a hell portal.
EPR Prime says Alex sounds like he's trying to do a Brad impression, which is not. It's pretty good.
Emails. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on over here. I may not be talking at length about anything today. I obviously will try to keep in the conversation, but every time I talk for more than like a minute, my throat starts to feel like it's on fire, which is great. It's the best thing. I
Well,
love it.
it's a good thing that you do a regular podcast, even though I gave you like a 2 week break.
No, you did, and then we spent something like collectively like 18 hours talking into microphones over the last like 10, 11 days.
Yeah, it's weird to come back and have to think about video games again because once you've done the game of the year stuff and we still have to figure out our own lists and we have to figure out the guest list. There's still plenty of work to be done regarding a game of the year, but I don't know. There's something final about doing that staff list and then coming back and being like, I guess I'll play more Captain Toad to see if that's gonna squirm its way onto my list. I don't know. It feels odd, and things already felt final, and yet here we are, still in 2014.
Yeah, I haven't touched Captain Toad yet at all. I am looking forward to playing that. The only thing I'm still kind of trying to figure out for my own list. So I played enough Dragon Age to kind of know what that game was when we were having conversations about it, but I have not played enough to decide if it's going on my own list yet or not. So that is my only real goal over the next week or so is to just sink enough hours into that game to where I feel strongly enough about whether it should be on my list or not. I also got a code for Elegy for a Dead World, which is a game that I actually backed on Kickstarter and I forgot was coming out this year at all.
I don't think it's
So
out. I don't think it's out yet. I think it's like early
I
access
think it's
beta version.
out. Is
Really?
it?
Because I
I
judged
think
it for IGF, and the version I played was not done.
there are like reviews for that game hitting, which leads me to believe that it
Really?
is not unfinal. Maybe
That's
someone in
like
the chat can confirm, but
that's the game where you like create your own stories, right? Like you.
yeah, it's a writing game.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the version I played for IGF was like an IGF build from months and months ago. Usually those are. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, that game looks neat. It's basically like there's a series of premises and sort of like otherworldly backgrounds that you control a character against, and then you get to different points where you write in. Well, you could write a word, you could write a quote, you could write a sentence. It's basically a bunch of prompts for you to write your own story, and then those stories are shared, in a community, and it sounds neat. It's an interesting way to sort of get people to think about writing in a way that is beyond just like you stood in a meadow, go from there, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it sounded like a cool enough premise that I was willing to drop a couple of bucks on it on Kickstarter. And yeah, so people in the chat are confirming that game is out.
Weird.
Um,
Okay. All right.
it makes sense because they sent me a Steam code for it, and it wasn't like a beta code. It was like, here is your code for this game. So
Huh.
yeah,
Well, stupid games coming out in December making me think I need to play them.
yeah, I still got to play Game of Thrones. Like I haven't touched that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed that. I think you'll enjoy that too. I more so than probably Tales from the Borderlands for sure, which I need to finish actually. That first episode, it'd be weird to pick it up halfway through, but that's where I'm at. I need to play Kentucky Route Zero. That's sort of my one that I need to spend some time with, get through the episodes that are available, figure out if that's something that, if the other episodes are as good as the first episode was, it will probably try and find its way into my list somehow, because that game, it's something else, super weird in a really terrific way.
Yeah, that game is sort of my great shame right now, is that I am where you're at. I played the first episode and liked it, but then just kind of never went back to the other ones. Everyone has told me that the last 2 episodes of that game are phenomenal, which I could totally see being the case. I just, for some reason, have not managed to get back to it yet. And by for some reason, I mean because I have all these other video games that I've been playing, and I'm an asshole, and I have not gone back to it.
Well, and also we regularly criticize Telltale for not having a regular schedule. The Kentucky Route Zero episodes just sort of materialize at some point during the year. There's no, well, look for this one in 3 or 4 months. It's sort of, I don't know, we uploaded it today. 8 months later, here's a new episode. I mean, they haven't even said if they're going to finish that series next year. It might not be 2016 when they get around to, getting to whatever conclusion they have in mind, even though, there's a story, but I don't know that that's the reason that you're coming to Kentucky Route Zero.
I actually have heard the opposite, which is to say
Really?
that the story actually becomes the reason you come. Like the story in the latter stages of the game are actually pretty phenomenal. So I don't know. Like I said, that's just what I've heard from other people. I am exactly where you are on that game as of this recording.
I'm probably going to have to start that over. I remember bits and pieces from the first episode, but it seems like if I'm going to kind of dive back into that, I should probably just do it whole hog and see the whole thing through. And there's also they've put out not appendices, but like B-sides to download as well that are not just Kentucky Route Zero official episodes, but things that complement the story that I've heard from various people are actually potentially better than what's actually happening in the main line. So there's quite a bit to catch up on, and that's, I don't know. We're in the cleanup phase, I guess, of Game of the Year, in which
we are.
The heavy lifting has been done, and now it's just a matter of getting all of our ducks in a row and figuring out the lingering details to be done. But fortunately or unfortunately, there are a lot of lingering details to be taken care of. So it's just a ton of small things that add up into quite a lot that'll keep us going through at least the end of next week, and probably having us logging into the site intermittently as that stuff actually goes up on the site.
Yeah, I gotta do my own list still, which as of last writing had about 15 games on it.
I haven't started whittling mine down yet. I need to sit down, and maybe I should take my first whack at that today, and then at the bottom just put still to play, think might be on here, and then figure those out over the next couple of days.
Yeah, and it's like I think Dragon Age is really the only big one of those that I still kind of need to get through. The rest of them, I feel like I'm pretty locked in on at least. And then I'm managing our guest list this year, which not going to name any names, not going to put anything out there. I'm just going to say if we get everyone who has said they will do one, we should have about 30 guests this year, all of which I'm pretty excited about. I think it's going to be a real good lineup.
Yeah, I woke up this morning to one of the higher profile guests that we had reached out to, crossing our fingers about, and this individual delivered their list, and it's wonderful. In fact, 2 of the ones that I've gotten back so far have been, for various reasons, wonderful. And it's shaping up to be, like in years past, some new people that we think you'll be really excited to hear from, some regulars of the website, and some things that fall in between. But it should be good. There's gonna be a lot going on the site, and that last day of real shooting that we did with everyone doing stuff, I don't want to say anything more than that, was, I think even the raw footage was fantastic. It'll be even better when they put it together into the thing, but I enjoyed shooting that quite a bit.
recording those videos is what finally completely solidified me on the concept that we were going for. Because, you know, the stuff that I had filmed sort of individually and other stuff, it seemed like, okay, there's something to this. The shit that we filmed as a group, I think, is what makes it all good.
Yeah, it comes together in a pretty wonderful way that I think everyone is going to be. You're all going to enjoy it. You know, it's certainly a weird thing every year when it's how do we do something we thought we had the good idea last year, and then somehow, some way, it all comes together all over again.
Somehow we got stupider.
Yeah, and thanks to the magic of the wonderful video editors we have, our stupidity somehow comes across as serendipity and ingenious, and I'll accept it for what it is.
It's endearing instead of just baffling.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, I don't know. I have not played too many video games this week. I decided to give myself at least a 48-hour reprieve from video games, just because there was so much of them, both played and in my mind and out of my mouth as a result of Game of the Year. I sort of jumped back into Captain Toad last night. I'm in the final sprint of episode 3, which I want to say is the final episode of Captain Toad. It's only broken up into episodes to kind of represent the story arcs, of which there are not tremendously deep, but there are sort of some twists and turns that take place to justify some of the stuff that happens throughout the game, and so working my way through the last third of it, it seems, and really, really enjoying it. I have committed to myself to not moving on to the next stage until I have found and done everything in the previous stage. So I'm collecting all 3 diamonds. I'm doing the bonus objective, and I'm not moving on to the next one until I have done all of those, because we probably talked about this on the podcast, or we talked about it on the Game of the Year podcast. I can't tell because it all blurs together in a weird amalgamation of audio and video. But I'm reluctant to ever say that a person should play a game a certain way. But I have found with these types of games from Nintendo that really embracing the optional objectives as the primary path to completing the game is the way that you really enjoy the little touches they have scattered throughout Captain Toad. And the moments I've had where I've spent 5 minutes banging my head against a stage looking for a golden mushroom, going, there's nowhere for this goddamn thing to hide, and then you just tilt the camera a certain way, you see a little plant in the ground, and boom, you have found that golden mushroom. They do a lot with a little, and I have found it to be a very impressive game that, I totally understand, people rolling their eyes at it costing $40. I think there is some value to that argument, but for what it is, I am having a tremendously good time with it. It's a fantastic little puzzle game, and just, it's very cute.
I think it's good knowing that going in, for my part, because that was kind of the issue I ran into initially playing the last Mario Brothers game, was that I'm not the sort of person that naturally tends to go to try and do everything on my first playthrough. Like, I tend to just sort of try and get through the stages and unlock more stuff so I can get to new stages. So I got to that point in the game where you hit that halfway point and all that other shit opens up. And I was able, I had enough stars to kind of initially get going, and then I kind of hit a wall where it was like, oh wait, I have all these other stars I haven't collected, so I need to go back and I need to play all these other stages. And I think if I had been a little bit more of the mind that I should be doing this from the get-go, I might not, I eventually finished that game, but it took me way longer than it would have if I had actually just kind of taken the time to go through and do that stuff, collect more stars initially, because I was dragging my ass after a certain point, like, oh, I just don't want to go back and play those stages again and again. I just want to keep going. But yeah, I haven't gotten the impression that, that's really an issue for anything in Captain Toad. Does it have, does it gate progression at all because of that, or is it more just you're just missing out on stuff if you don't find it?
It does gate progression based on the amount of diamonds that you collect, but I assume that if you're just collecting the obvious ones along the way, that the game would make impossible to miss. I think you'd have to go out of your way to not collect enough to actually beat the game.
Right.
You know, there's enough on the main path that they just sort of litter about that I have to imagine those are enough for you to, it's basically like 2/3 of them are on the main path, and then the last third you really have to dig for, and those bonus objectives can be a little tricky. They overuse some of the bonus objectives a little bit too much, but I've enjoyed having reasons to look at those levels in a different way. Often with platforming stuff, everything's kind of digestible. You make your way through the initial challenge and then move on with your life. And I've really enjoyed the idea of sitting and just really puzzling through these stages to kind of discover their secrets. And some people just want to plow through it, and that's fine. I would just put like an asterisk next to that game saying you will not get as much enjoyment out of it if that's the way you play it.
Right.
And yeah, so I'll probably finish that either tonight or tomorrow morning, sort of at the end bits of that. I'm not sure if anything is unlocked by doing everything. I like that they reward you with, extra hard levels in previous Mario games, but I'm not sure how they're handling it in Captain Toad. I have to imagine there's something you get for collecting everything in the game so far, but I'm not sure exactly what that is.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
A lot of people in the chat talking about this Talos principle, which I've been hearing other good things about, but I have not played.
Yeah, I've read fairly positive things about that game. It sounds like the kind of game that I probably would like a ton right up front, and then as soon as it got hard, I would start fucking sobbing about it, and then just stop playing it because it's a first-person puzzle type thing, right? Like sort of puzzle adventure.
Yeah, and I've heard the puzzles are brutal. Not in a way that they're bad, just that
they're hard.
Puzzle-ass puzzle game.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this about me, but when it comes to puzzle-ass puzzle games, the ass part is more the emphasis there for me.
Yeah, I think that's, that's, even relative to something like Captain Toad, if you do get frustrated, I've managed to find everything without, getting too upset at one level or another, but the game is designed in a way that, well, screw it, just keep going forward. I'm not sure how the Talos principle is made. I think it's always nice when you play puzzle games and you can come back to a puzzle as opposed to having to be stuck at a location solving a particular puzzle in order to move forward. I thought that's something that a game like Antichamber did exceptionally well in that, it was gating your progression based on these puzzles, but for vast majority of the game, you often had a litany of options in front of you so that if something just wasn't clicking, you could go futz around elsewhere, maybe solve a couple there, hit another roadblock, come back, and then hopefully that puzzle would make more sense or your brain will have kind of worked it out in the subconscious. But I like it when games recognize just having the player bash their head against a wall over and over again is not necessarily conducive to a good time. But puzzle games are so unique because they are so player dependent on your own internal logic, and a easy puzzle to someone is going to be the hardest puzzle to someone else, and that's kind of a difficult thing to explain.
It's what it kind of drives me nuts sometimes if I ever, or really any of us ever have to do puzzle games for quick looks or whatever. You can see people just screaming in the comments, "How did he not see that? How did that not work?" And it's like, dude, your brain doesn't always put the pieces together, especially when you are under any kind of pressure on camera situation. It's why I don't readily volunteer for games like that, because I know when I play something like that, I spend hours agonizing over some of those puzzles, trying to make that shit fit together, and it's shit that I know some people would just pick out immediately, and that's fine. I'm cool with that, but I ain't gonna put that shit in front of a camera because you people are judgy. You're all so judgy.
It's why one of my favorite videos I ever participated on the site was the Portal 2 co-op TNT with Mr. Ryan Davis, which, God, people were angry while watching us play that. And that's half the reason that Ryan and I chose to do it. I mean, we wanted to check out that co-op stuff. I mean, we were like, well, whatever, we'll just make that for TNT. And I remember raising the question of, people are not going to, they're going to be angry when we do this, Ryan. He's like, I know. And it's going to be beautiful.
Let them hate. Let them hate.
It was a good time. So have you been playing anything yourself, or you mostly just wait until the weekend Trying to.
Yeah, I've mostly been waiting to the weekend. The one thing I have kind of dug into a little bit, as is my want, is the new Hearthstone expansion stuff.
Right, yeah, you were buying and or retrieving. How does this? We were talking about this briefly. Explain this to the audience. In which I thought you had to pay for this, and you said you did. You do not.
No, you don't. So if you have a Hearthstone, you boot up the game as of the time when this expansion has been out. Those cards are just inserted into the scheme of the game. You get 3 packs of those cards that you can open up right away, and then there is a separate pack option later on if you want to buy packs or do whatever you're doing. I think arena run packs now, for at least the time being, are all gnomes versus goblins packs. But yeah, you just start getting those cards and you just start trying to slide them into your deck and seeing what you can do with them. And that is, I think, the right way to go about it, because there's no single player content that comes along with this. Like, there's no, campaign or whatever. Which is not to say that the Naxxramas campaign itself was worth the extra money, but it was worth it for me to get the cards. In this case, you just get the cards for free, or if you drop money, you can just buy a whole bunch at once.
Are you enjoying the new cards? Like beyond just this is crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing. The game is fucking chaos right now. Strategies that were working for people long term have not necessarily been turned on their head, but they have at least been challenged. The new mechs, mechs are the new class of cards that you can get. Trying to create new combinations around those is really interesting. Like, all the different individual classes have at least one mech card that they can use, so you can either choose to build up around it or just ignore it, whatever. It's cool. I like that it is total nonsense right now, because everyone seems like they're just experimenting with stuff. They're trying to figure shit out. And a lot of those new cards are very chance-based. Like, there's a lot of randomization options in there that can create some real fucking insane shit if you have the right card mix. And I love that. Some people criticize that game for being, a lot more random than maybe other CCGs are. I think maybe that's why I like it as opposed to other CCGs, because I'm an idiot. And so, despite being an idiot, if the right confluence of events takes place, I could fucking destroy someone, and that makes me really happy.
You know what that sounds like?
What?
Smash Brothers.
Yeah, okay.
Mm?
All right.
Mm?
Hey, I am on the side of this Smash Brothers. As someone who has not liked Smash Brothers throughout most of his life, not out of any real distaste for it, but just not really understanding it and not wanting to understand it. I still don't understand it, but in playing it 8-player with you guys last Friday and whatever, I was having fun with it. I was digging it. I didn't care that I was just fucking mashing buttons. It was fun.
Yeah, I guess most of it slightly being facetious, and then also I do think there's a common thread there of allowing enough wiggle room in a game so that someone who really knows what they're doing is going to be able to command what's going on, but there's still always the chance that someone who kind of sort of barely knows what they're doing can compete or pull off an upset. And allowing a game to have both scenarios, I think, is key to making it approachable in the way that Hearthstone makes itself approachable to folks who otherwise would look at a CCG and roll their eyes, which I think is a lot of people that are playing Hearthstone. Certainly myself.
Yeah, and in this case, I feel like most of the stuff they've added is good. Like, there are definitely elements of some of those cards that I could totally see being abused real badly at some point, but so far it doesn't seem like anyone's quite figured out how to do that effectively. And honestly, I think my favorite thing about it is that they finally made the pirate class useful. Like, those pirate cards actually kind of work in better order now, because they've added enough stuff around it to finally make that class work. That was like the one class of cards that I never saw anyone using in that game, and I think they've finally figured out a way to make that stuff at least semi-useful. Like, I've seen rogues using pirate decks, which is something that I never saw before.
Interesting. Well, that is your Hearthstone update.
That's the Hearthstone Minute
with Alex Navarro. So let's. There's actually a decent bit of news going around for December, of all months in which usually things grind to a halt, but that is not the case. We went over a lot of the PlayStation Experience and the Game Awards material during the various podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
The one that has sort of caught my eye that kind of certainly was one of the dominant topics on Twitter and elsewhere yesterday was the one great news that Papers, Please, also known as Patrick Klubnik's Game of the Year for 2013.
Yeah, that's a good ass game.
It's a really good ass game, and also like a depressing ass game. Is coming to iPad today, I believe. I think it's officially out, not now, but somewhat later today, I believe, is when it will launch on the App Store. So I think that means it'll probably launch in New Zealand first. Is usually how that weird rollout happens. But in any case, it was a game that when I played it, you immediately saw the potential for this to work on a tablet, whether it's an iPad or whatever the Nexus, whatever the other tablets that I don't know too much about are. I know that Lucas Pope, the developer, has only created an iPad version right now. I don't know if there are actual plans to release it beyond Apple's ecosystem, but it's a game that I'm not going to be surprised if it works spectacularly well on the iPad, and I was super interested in checking it out, and in some ways I still am interested in checking it out just to see how it works. Oh, hello, ESPN alert.
Important sports.
Yeah.
Sports
President
importance.
Obama coming up on ESPN to talk about the NFL. Thanks
Great.
for let me know, Sports Center. To see how it just works with the touch interface, but the more pertinent news angle is that one of the elements of Papers, Please is that you are sort of participatory in this dystopian police state in which the way it treats not only its citizens but foreigners or others or outsiders, however you want to characterize it, is in a very demeaning and critical and often crazy ways. And as the game progresses, you gain additional tools as a result of the state's power to sort of scrutinize the people coming over the border. One of which is the ability to search them, and you search them by using a scanner, a full body scanner that allows you to see to their most inner private parts. It's not pornographic. It is not titillating. It is in fact deeply uncomfortable, and is supposed to make the player feel weird and strange and participatory in a what I think we would all consider a fairly disturbing and disgusting act. But when that game was submitted to the App Store as its equivalent of a mature, which I think is like 18 plus, so you have to have your age restrictions set appropriately on whatever device you're downloading it on. It was rejected by Apple, and the Lucas Pope, the designer, got in touch with Apple and tried to figure out exactly what was the part of the rejection, and he was sort of told that the nudity was considered pornographic by Apple standards, and then if that was changed, the game would probably be accepted. So Lucas Pope then went in, I believe made it partial nudity, so it's sort of like underwear.
Right.
I believe is how the people are now represented. Toned it down to sort of a teen level rating, resubmitted it, and the game was accepted into the App Store. But he was clear about explaining what happened during that process, because obviously it is whether that's censored or not, is a question we can get into, but the game was changed as a result of policies so that the game could get into Apple's marketplace, and it is understandably caused some ire.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a new thing for Apple. I mean, they've had these slightly draconian policies about the game content for a long time. I feel like this is maybe one of the more noteworthy examples of it, because it's the first time I can recall, at least, a game that was fairly well established on other platforms coming to iOS and having something this specific be the blockade from getting onto the platform. If the nudity in Papers, Please fits your definition of pornographic, then your definition of pornographic is puritanical in a way that I cannot wrap my brain around. It's the opposite, in my mind, of anything even remotely pornographic. It is uncomfortable and unpleasant, and that's the whole point, is that it's there to kind of sort of like make you feel bad about the choices that you have made, the things that you are doing to people in that game. Like that whole game is about doing bad things to people and also bad things being done to you. So yeah, all right, fine. You have this extremely rigid definition of nudity and where it fits into games on your platform, and you're not going to, and to get on iOS, I imagine most developers aren't willing to make like a huge stink about something like this because that platform is such a huge potential boon for any game that gets on there. So I get it, and I don't blame Lucas Pope one bit for going that route to make that change. I think it is one more example of where Apple, I think, sometimes fails to recognize the potential for what that platform could host and could have in the face of just trying not to offend anyone.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Apple's App Store review guidelines, which sort of gives people a heads up on how, their App Store ecosystem works as you're developing an app or thinking about developing an app. And in the introduction, the second paragraph, we view apps different than books or songs, which we do not curate. If you want to criticize a religion, write a book. If you want to describe sex, write a book or a song or create a medical app. It can get complicated, but we've decided to not allow certain kinds of content in the App Store. It may help to keep some of our broader themes in mind. And then they kind of go through some of the stuff in a little more explicit terms. But it's they don't hide their double standard, but I believe their double standard becomes increasingly hard to justify, especially given, in especially this case, the arbitrary way and puritanical way that it's handled.
Yeah.
If they don't want to allow games with like explicit sex scenes, I still think they need to rethink what they want this marketplace to be and what it's, especially how it reflects their power in the marketplace.
Right.
But this specific instance is so bizarre, given that, exactly like you said, there's almost no way to look at how they applied the letter of the law here and think that it's accurate. There's no way to look at Papers, Please and say that that is pornographic. It is nudity, but it is definitely not pornography, and it's an application of their own standard that just, I don't think, even applies to what they're saying. And it's so frustrating. I'm someone that in general, I own, by and large, all Apple products when it comes to, sort of my ancillary devices, including a laptop, because I really enjoy their design philosophy. I'm okay with their restrictions in large part because it means that their platforms talk to one another in a way that other ecosystems don't, so you kind of reap benefits there. But it's stuff like this where I don't think the stuff they have put in place, it's not censorship in the capital C sense of the word, because it's not a government saying, Lucas Pope, you cannot create this, it is illegal to create this. But there is trickle-down censorship when a creator, would this mean that someone might not create a Papers, Please type game because they look at the App Store as the best way to release their product, the best way to make money on a product, and thus they limit their creativity or modify their creativity in order to fit those marketplace standards. And I think where we draw that line, as a society, is that we don't, we're okay, or at least we're kind of okay with the fact that the ESRB and their AO rating means certain types of games aren't made and that are not sold at Walmart. I think we get a broad range of video games. It's mostly on the violent end. America has an uncomfortable relationship with sex that is different than its relationship with violence. But at least, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those instances where Apple needs to bend, and not bend in the way that Papers, Please gets a pass and maybe gets an update that adds this back in, but that their policies are changed to better reflect what the App Store has become, which is a dominant force in video games, in software, in entertainment, and that they need to reflect the broad range of all of those things in terms of what content is created for it.
Mac Wikos in the chat makes this point, which is that the iOS version of The Wolf Among Us actually has naked boobs in it, and Apple let it through somehow.
Huh.
I have not played that version of that game, so I would appreciate it if anyone else could confirm or deny that. But if that's the case, you know that old quote about the definition of pornography? In this case, I don't always know how to describe a bad content policy when I see it, but I know it when I see it. And
Yeah.
I think this is probably just kind of a badly applied content policy.
Yeah, and it's I understand gatekeeping to both keep some measure of quality in some degree, but I mean you can't make that argument anymore at the App Store. Like there's tons of garbage, and yeah, one hopes that this gives them some pause. I wonder in some ways if this is a holdover from the Steve Jobs era. Steve Jobs had a very draconian view about having almost a Disney-like approach to how it curated. He was very anti-pornography, I guess, is if you've read his
Sure.
biography and if you've read up on him, like he was very, very specific about that point. And he also was very specific in that he didn't have a great respect for games. I don't know if he was against games in so much as he just did not care for the medium. Games were an afterthought in the App Store, and so it wouldn't surprise me if games and the way Apple approaches them from a policy perspective is also a holdover from that era. And one would hope that maybe this is a point to start considering rethinking how that is handled. I've talked to several iOS developers who, try and make serious games, or, not necessarily, serious in that they are full of mature quote unquote content, but games that take the medium seriously. And they say that every time they're asked for feedback from Apple, this is one of the main pushbacks they give, is that this double standard has to change, or at least be modified in a way that people feel more comfortable to create whatever they want to make on this platform, because it's probably going to be here for a long time. I don't think it's going anywhere. It is part of our future in a way that we have to be prepared for, and hopefully Apple understands some of the weight of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that Lucas Pope has said he's going to investigate appealing to Apple and see if he can put it in through an update. So we'll see if that ends up happening, but certainly nothing to report on that front. And it'll probably be a pretty good version of that game. And if everything else is in that game, it's still going to be a good-ass version of Papers, Please. I think this is more of a principle than it is saying this, actually. I think it detracts from the experience, but I think it will still be enjoyable, quote unquote, for as much as Papers, Please was enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure.
It was revealed earlier this week that Microsoft will publish Rise of the Tomb Raider. We had previously heard it will be an exclusive for Xbox One for some timed period, and it appears that still might be the case, but that Microsoft will actually have their name attached to it in a way that makes their involvement in that product seem a little more pronounced than we had thought in the past.
I'm sorry, what was happening? Sorry, I was looking at a link that FobWatch sent me, which is the nudity option in Papers, Please.
Microsoft's going to publish Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Good for them.
Yeah, you psyched for them?
I don't know. I mean, it's like, well, whatever. I mean, they were the ones that they locked in the exclusive for that, and so it makes sense that if they're really pushing this as an exclusive for the system, then sure, yeah, why wouldn't they publish it? And it's not like, fucking Square Enix couldn't use the monetary assistance these days anyway.
Well, I think it potentially illustrates a dark trend, sort of an undercurrent of this generation of software and consoles, in which if Street Fighter V is an exclusive in which Sony is taking an active part of that process, and if
Right.
some of the rumors floating around that game was potentially on the chopping block at Capcom, and if the last Tomb Raider, which we all thought was a pretty good game, and was also I think sold 3 or 4 million copies, if that wasn't enough for Square Enix to justify a sequel, we may be in some really troubling territory in which third parties are releasing critically and commercially successful games and yet not being able to justify making another one of those unless a first party steps in to make sure that it's financially viable. And that may partially reflect upon the financials of those two companies. Square Enix, obviously, on the Japan side, has been struggling Um, Capcom, has kind of been up and down. Maybe it's just those two companies. Maybe it's just them transitioning, but I don't know. It worries me as much as it makes things exciting to hear that exclusives are back again. I guess I don't know if those exclusives are back for the right reasons. It feels like they might be back because those games wouldn't exist otherwise, and that sort of scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, that's the telling thing, and it's even different than like when I was hearing that Sony was use like they have a team dedicated to helping get indie games onto their platform. Like saying, hey, we'll help you with the ports. We'll kind of give you this support and this support to make sure that you get onto the platform. Like those are smaller teams that don't have a lot of resources, so I can kind of understand why that would need to be there. We're talking about fucking Capcom making a new Street Fighter game and saying that Sony had to give them like integral help in making that game in order for it to exist, and hence the exclusive and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't speak well of the current state of a publisher like Capcom or a publisher like Square Enix. I mean, Square Enix we already knew kind of had some problems. Like, when you're talking about the number of however many millions of copies Tomb Raider sold, and it still wasn't enough. That says to me, one, either they're just really bad at budgeting, or two, they have much deeper problems than just how many copies Tomb Raider sold.
Or just
I don't know.
where our industry has headed. So video games are a lot like Hollywood. It's boom or bust, and it's a hit-based business. And you're moving on to the next one, hoping that one's a hit. And if that one's not a hit, you're hoping the next one's a hit, and then can cover the losses of the previous one. A game like Thief. We're probably not going to see another Thief. That game was sort of panned. No one really cared for it. I doubt it sold particularly well either. So it's like, okay, well, you need another game to make up for the 4 or 5 years of development of Thief, so that you don't have to lay those people off, so you can justify that team working on something else. And it just, it's probably a confluence of factors. It's not any one thing. It's not just that video games are more expensive or being worked on for longer, or that the expectations are higher. There's probably a lot at work here that has made making video games such a precarious business, but it's distressing, and it worries me about where we're going to be in a couple of years. Like, is every major publisher just one huge flop away from going the way of THQ? It's probably not that dire, but it's worrisome, and also sort of these announcements also make me reflect on how disinterested I am sometimes in the first-party lineups of kind of everyone but Nintendo. Not to say there aren't games coming from Sony or Microsoft that I think are interesting or I'm going to enjoy, but when I'm getting that much more excited about the third-party exclusives that they're procuring as opposed to what they're building internally, that's not great either.
No. And, take it even a step further than that. You look at, okay, so we're at the point now where a Sony or a Microsoft is essentially having to funnel their own development resources into these third-party publishers to ensure that games like Street Fighter and Rise of the Tomb Raider can come out on those platforms. Now you couple that with things like the sheer number of, like, say, broken games we've had come out this holiday. Games that, if we were to go by old console testing standards, like platform testing standards, might not have been able to make it out to release on time because they probably would have failed due to bugs and crashes and other sorts of things that, theoretically an in-house QA team would be saying, no, this can't go. It's starting to make me wonder if there isn't like this actual desperation starting to sort of bubble more to the surface for companies like Microsoft and Sony just trying to get games onto those platforms. Like, we've heard people talk before about how publishers weren't necessarily ready for this console generation to come as quickly as it should have. Couple that with, other financial issues, and, you start seeing situations where, like, not only are there not a ton of games coming out, but some of the ones that are coming out are kind of fucked. And I'm wondering if this isn't all just feeding from some sort of, like, larger desperation from the platform holders just to make sure there are games coming to those systems.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of the first-party stuff either taking longer to get up and running, or there's just not that much there, and these third-party stuff is kind of trying to fill the gaps. I mean, you've essentially seen Sony do this with their incredible lineup of independent games that they've signed for the PS4 and Vita. Now, I don't want to take anything away from those games, but the vast majority of those are ports of existing hit PC games or cult classics that are kind of padding the PS4 and Vita lineup. And if you were to take those away, which is sort of a weird arbitrary rule to apply because they exist there, but if you took those away, that lineup is incredibly thin, and that seems to be kind of a pattern with all of the machines right now. Is just we're a year in, and the content still seems pretty thin, and what's worse is that it doesn't seem like it's going to get much better in the year ahead, especially with how many games get delayed and sort of the tempered expectations for games that have come out and then not delivered in the way we expected them to.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't know. It's worrisome, and it's like the exclusivity part of it is almost like the least bothersome part of it, because like if you are funneling those kinds of resources into developers, then of course you would want that exclusivity. Like that just kind of makes business sense. It is the larger trend of palpable desperation that is concerning to me. And the companies will never admit to that, and I understand it. It's me just kind of spitballing here, but I think it's something to look out for, because it's not like there's a huge volume of games slated to come out next year. Yeah, there's more, but how many of those are going to end up getting pushed off? How many of those games are going to end up, getting pushed into like weird exclusivity that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise? It's tough to, and it's concerning.
Yeah, I would say so. Also concerning, or just plain weird, is so you've been paying attention to the news at all. You're aware that Sony was, and specifically Sony Pictures, was targeted for a rather unprecedented hack of its corporate data, which is believed to be linked to an upcoming Seth Rogen film called The Interview, in which Seth Rogen and James Franco are tasked by the CIA, I would assume, with killing the leader of North Korea, and that has apparently made North Korea angry, and so they hacked into.
Yeah, they don't like
Sony.
that.
No, it's And anyway, so kind of neither here nor there in regards to that specifically, but a lot of emails were dumped out of that, and so people have been sifting through those emails, and the ethics of that are sort of a separate question, but there are news stories being written about them, and one of which alleges or insinuates that Sony Pictures has actually signed a deal with Nintendo to produce a Mario film, an animated one, which that part is not particularly shocking, but the idea that Nintendo, after so many years of distancing themselves from Hollywood, given their last attempts to sort of do live action or animated stuff, did not go particularly well. The idea that they would dip their toe into the water again with Sony, of all companies, is interesting, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, when you talk about Sony Pictures versus, Sony Computer Entertainment, I imagine that any studio that had a decent pitch for that property, like, probably could have got in there. And I mean, I know Nintendo has said in the past that they'd talked about wanting to do their own in-house stuff, but I'm not sure that they're really in a position to do that well yet. So it makes a certain amount of sense that if they really want to test the waters on potentially creating more film properties for their stuff, that they would at least reach out, on some kind of temporary deal to see what someone else could do, just to kind of get, their feet back into it a little bit. I mean, the idea of an animated Mario film does not particularly offend me, especially after that live action movie. I'm not sure much else could offend me more than that. But that said, I don't know. Like, from what little I read of it, and I've tried to kind of avoid reading any of that Sony email stuff for the most part, just because like the whole thing just makes me kind of weird and uncomfortable. But for me, it's just, if they want to go that route, that's great. But I have to imagine that like the audience that is demanding a Mario film I can't imagine how large that really is. Like I can't. I'm having a really hard time like envisioning like a super successful animated Mario film at this point.
Well, I don't know. Like, oh man, Chris Lord and who are the guys that did the Lego Movie? Paul Miller,
Oh
Chris
yeah,
Lord.
I can't remember their names, but
Chris
those
Lord's
guys.
one of them, though, right? I feel like that's one of them.
Yeah. Now, do you would you trust Nintendo to let a pair of writers like that do what they wanted to it, like actually go where they want to go with it?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have to imagine that they would have to step away in some regard. But I think if you look at, Wreck-It Ralph, which featured some Nintendo characters, I mean, there's two ways. You can go the heartfelt, nostalgic, really cutesy route, which is Wreck-It Ralph, or you have the more irreverent treatment of the material, which is kind of the Lego Movie. And I think either one of those could potentially work. I don't know. I don't know how you write a Mario film. That's like turning those into characters that speak at length seems a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that the now if you got the people who wrote like say the Paper Mario games or the Mario and Luigi games and you kind of get like went more in that direction with the writing, I could maybe be okay with that. But when you think about like most main Mario games, there's like no story in those games. Like that's not why you're coming to those things. Like the characterizations are not really why you're there. So
Right, but also, I wouldn't have thought a movie based on Legos would be any good, and that was probably one of the better films from this year, honestly.
I think maybe some people overstate the merits of that film a little bit, but sure, okay, yes, you're right. That was far better than it had any right to be.
Okay, if you wanted, like, best movie surprise of 2014, the Lego Movie probably takes that pretty handedly.
It's up, yeah, it's way up there, way up there.
Relative to expectations and the franchise producing a quality film. I guess I'm saying it's not impossible, but I also think, those guys that, did that for 21 Jump Street and for the Lego Movie perhaps instill too much confidence in Hollywood's ability to take questionable licenses for 90-minute films and produce something entertaining, because those guys seem to have a knack for taking what shouldn't work and making it work, and there are very few people who can actually do that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, as some people in the chat saying, like, these hacks are gross, and people reporting on it are gross too, and I would say a lot of it I would agree with you.
I think reporting on it is totally fair game because it is an event that took place. I think actually publishing the emails and like rooting around through the contents of the stuff that was released, that's where I have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get into some really interesting ethical questions of if a stack of information is out there, as a journalist, are you supposed to just ignore it, or no, or are you supposed to go through it and use, your own personal ethics to determine what is newsworthy information as a result? I think, reporting on, a Mario movie, or the conversations that Marvel reportedly had with Sony, trying to get Spider-Man into the Marvel Studios films. I think that is newsworthy information. Reporting on, what some producer thinks of Angelina Jolie or what some studio head said about Barack Obama, I think is gross and disgusting and irrelevant and gossipy in the way that I really dislike how a lot of modern, internet reporting, or just, what you find in a tabloid magazine. It's pretty much on the same level. I think as a reporter you have a certain obligation to look at information. When I break stories, or other journalists break stories, it's not like that was handed over because the company wanted that to be disclosed. So,
right.
A lot of how this job works when it comes to breaking information is stuff that people don't want out there. But the nature of how this was released is obviously a little bit different, given that nobody signed off on this being, it's not like an employee said, this information needs to get out there. So it is obviously one of those areas in which there's, I don't blame people for feeling uncomfortable, because you should feel uncomfortable.
I mean, but at the same time, if that makes you uncomfortable, then you should at least consider, if not, I'm not saying that you have to feel this way about it, but at least, have the thought in your head that maybe you should feel that way as well about something like that Assassin's Creed Victory leak. You know, that was something that some employee somewhere decided to leak to an outlet and, you know, and provide assets, provide a grand amount of detail about what that game was. And that was obviously something Ubisoft did not want. So, you know, this is a much grander, like a much huger scale. This is, and it goes much deeper and much more personal when you start including, like, you know, company emails and all that kind of passwords, all that kind of shit.
Yeah. And it's also,
But
you know,
it's at least in the neighborhood.
This, you know, and this gets to sort of a central question that I struggle with as someone that, you know, reports on entertainment. Basically, is that often when you are wrestling with these questions about what to disclose, how to disclose, what not to disclose, you often weigh that against the public good, is sort of the journalistic term that is used, and you know, that's a very nebulous term when we're talking about entertainment reporting, right? Like, what is the public good of reporting on Marvel or Sony's potential talks for Spider-Man being in a Marvel Studios film, right? Like, does that serve anyone? You know, in the public good sense, probably not. But, you know, is part of being an entertainment reporter, you know, passing on information that you think your readers would be interested in, and that's probably true. But it gets really weird and murky really quickly because public good is, you know, not necessarily the best. You know, it's a good cornerstone to think about, but it becomes very hard to use as the exact barometer, given that, like, does knowing about the next Assassin's Creed, you know, in specific details, help anyone? I don't know. Probably not. Am I glad it's out there? Sure, but, you know, when you get into the public good conversation, it gets kind of weird pretty quick.
Yep.
I don't know. Xbox One's outsold the PS4. Way to go, Microsoft, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, they've had the stronger lineup this year.
Yeah, it was only 1 month, so who knows if that'll last. And it's just sales numbers, whoop-de-doo.
I know, but it's just, you know, I feel like it is, in that case, it is actually telling, because, you know, when I look at the games I played on Xbox One this year versus the games I played on PS4 this year, most of the stuff I played on PS4 was third party.
Yeah.
Vast majority of it.
It's true. Final Fantasy VII is going to cost $16 on PS4. That seems expensive.
Wait, how much?
$16.
All right.
Yeah. It's a good
Okay.
It's a good response.
All right.
Well, you're not going to pay that? You're not going to play Final Fantasy VII again?
Again?
You never played Final Fantasy VII?
I played a little of it.
Just a little?
Just a little. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy. I've never really been a Final Fantasy guy. Like, I 3D Final Fantasy especially has just never been my thing. So, yes, I have some experience with that game, and I have certainly gone back and watched a lot of it being played by other people, but no, not really my thing.
I thought everyone played Final Fantasy VII. It was like an event game.
I didn't own a PlayStation when that event was taking place.
Really?
No. I didn't get a PlayStation until way late in the cycle.
Did you, and you went N64?
Yeah, I was an N64 guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I'm sorry, does that alarm you? Am I disappointing you somehow?
It's just interesting.
Yeah.
No judgment, just that's interesting.
All right.
Tidbits with Alex Navarro.
Yeah.
Learning about the past of Alex Navarro with Alex Navarro.
Just, you know, I'm just putting myself out there.
It's nice. That's kind of you.
Yeah.
Well, I should probably we should let your voice rest.
Thank you. Because I have to go talk on another thing later today.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm doing the 404 show with Jeff Bacalauer later today. Vinny and I are going to be on there with Russ Frushtick talking about the year in games.
Great. That's the doctor's orders are talk more about video games, Alex.
I can't stop talking about video games. It's pathological. There's no stopping me.
Yeah, that's all of us. It's just too late now. But what are you going to get into this weekend other than talking about video games?
I'm going to get into more Dragon Age. I'm going to try out Elegy for a Dead World finally. in reality, I'm probably going to spend at least a few more hours playing Hearthstone. And that's pretty much it, other than just resting my ass up. What about you? Oh, wait, actually, before you say that, just real
Mm-hmm.
quick, those who have been waiting for the next Power Bombcast, look for that later today. I still have to edit it today, but that's what I'm doing today. Should be up by the end of the day.
Oh, cool. That's the one you guys recorded in the office?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I finished Captain Toad. I will probably start on Kentucky Route Zero and put some more hours into Dragon Age. That's kind of my focus going forward. I need to play more Dragon Age to figure out if that sort of fits into my top 10 games of the year, or where that fits into my top 10 games of the year, given that I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it before I have to finalize that list. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe I'll just take 2 weeks off and just play nothing but Dragon Age and just finish it off in a week.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of my plan for the weekend. I'm going to kind of take it easy. 10 days out in San Francisco. Did a lot of going out, a lot of seeing people. I'm sort of interested in doing as little as possible
Yeah.
over the next couple days.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's going to do it for Bombin with Scoops and the Wolf. Alex, I will see you again on Monday.
Oh.